What would you do if you built a billion-dollar empire, only to be treated like a criminal on your own flight? What if your seat in first class paid confirmed, and rightfully yours was questioned, not because of your name, but because of your skin? This is the true-to-life inspired story of Janelle Dawson, a calm, brilliant, and quietly powerful CEO who boarded Altitude Air Flight 1629 with no intention of making headlines, and walked off as the woman who would change the entire aviation industry. But this story isn't just about humiliation at 35,000 feet. It's about legacy, restraint, and the quiet fire it takes to rewrite systems that were never built for you in the first place. Why did the flight crew try to remove her from her seat? What secret power did Janelle hold that no one on board could see? And how did one silent decision change the future for millions of women and girls watching from the ground? Buckle up. You're about to hear the full story told in 12 unforgettable chapters. If this moves you, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps bring more true stories of dignity, justice, and transformation to light. Let's begin. The boarding tunnel smelled faintly of recycled air and overpriced pretzels. Janelle Dawson adjusted the strap of her plain canvas bag, stepped through the aircraft door, and was immediately greeted with a tight, rehearsed smile from the blonde flight attendant standing by the entrance. "Welcome aboard, ma'am," the woman said, eyes scanning Janelle from top to bottom in less than a second. "Economy is just down that way." Janelle didn't flinch. She offered a soft thank you and turned to her left, toward the first-class cabin. That single move seemed to jolt the attendant. "Excuse me," the woman interjected sharply. "First-class passengers only." Janelle paused. She reached calmly into her jacket and retrieved a phone, turning the screen to show a digital boarding pass. "Seat 2A, first class, clear as day." The flight attendant blinked, leaned in just close enough to look, then forced a thin smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Do you mind if I double-check that her name tag read Dana?" Her voice had shifted into the tone Janelle knew far too well. Polite on the surface, skeptical beneath. Janelle gave a small nod, still silent. Dana stepped aside and tapped at the nearby scanner, frowning as it beeped. Then she glanced at Janelle's name again. "Janelle Dawson," she repeated aloud, slowly, as though testing the name for cracks. The line behind them began to grow. Passengers in business attire shifted impatiently, some glancing up from their phones. Dana ignored them. "I'm sorry, but there seems to be a problem with the system," she said. "Your boarding pass isn't syncing. I think you may have been misassigned." A few people behind Janelle exchanged looks. One man whispered, seriously under his breath. Janelle turned slightly, caught the flash of an iPhone recording. Of course, these moments had become performance theater in modern travel. "I'll just go to my seat," Janelle said softly, not asking. She moved past Dana and stepped into the cabin, still calm, but every muscle alert. First class was nearly full. Rows of cream leather seats, folded blankets, sparkling water bottles aligned like trophies. Seat 2A was by the window, already prepped. She took one step toward it. "Ma'am," Dana's voice cracked across the cabin. The room shifted. Conversation stalled. A businessman paused mid-scroll. An older woman blinked twice and leaned into the aisle. "I'm going to need you to stop," Dana said. Her smile had vanished completely now. "This isn't your seat, and I need you to return to economy until we figure this out." Janelle faced her fully. Her posture remained relaxed, but her eyes now held something steelier. "It is my seat," she said. "I purchased it under my name." "Of course," Dana replied, folding her arms. "But we've had issues before with passengers misunderstanding their class assignments." Janelle didn't answer. She simply reached again into her coat pocket and produced her ID and booking confirmation, holding them both out wordlessly. Dana glanced at them, her lips pressed into a line, her face flushed just slightly. "I'll get a supervisor," she said at last, stepping away. Janelle turned back toward 2A. She didn't sit, not yet. Footsteps approached. A second flight attendant, this one younger, male, and with the easy swagger of someone used to being right, Caleb Finn. He gave her one sweeping look and smirked. Trying to sneak into first class, he asked, "We see it more than you'd think." "I'm not sneaking," Janelle replied evenly. Caleb chuckled. "Sure. Look, it's not personal. But if you're supposed to be in economy, it's just better for everyone if you take your assigned seat." "You can confirm with the scanner," she said, "and I'd appreciate it if we didn't do this in front of the entire cabin." But it was already happening. Eyes watched her, some hidden behind sunglasses, others direct. The judgment in the air was thick, a current of suspicion wrapped in polite silence. Then Dana returned. Her expression was tight with something like victory. "I'll need your ticket," she said. "We'll handle this manually." Janelle hesitated, not out of fear, out of tiredness. This wasn't the first time someone questioned her right to belong, but every time felt like the first cut. She handed it over. Dana snatched it, barely glancing before making a show of holding it up and tearing it cleanly in half. Gasps rippled through the cabin. "I'm sorry," Dana said curtly, "but fake tickets won't get you a seat in first class." Janelle looked down at the torn paper. The pieces drifted to the floor like confetti at the wrong kind of celebration. Her heart didn't race. Her hands didn't shake. But inside her, something deep began to uncoil. Not rage, not yet. Resolve. Behind her, a passenger finally spoke. "Are you seriously doing this?" It was a woman Asian American, early 20s, phone in hand. "This is out of line," she added. Dana ignored her. Caleb didn't even glance. The captain had not yet emerged, and Janelle knew deep in her bones that moment was coming. But for now, she bent down, picked up the half ticket without a word, folded it, slid it into her pocket. The cabin was quiet except for the sound of someone else recording. And in that space of stillness, Janelle made a quiet promise to herself. This ends today. Janelle didn't sit, even with her ticket torn, even with the humiliation still burning in the air like smoke after a fire. She remained standing in the aisle beside seat 2A. Her presence was still, unshaken, her breath calm. But inside, her mind turned like an engine quietly revving. She glanced at the empty seat again. Cream leather, window view, clean, untouched. She had selected it weeks ago, deliberately, not just for comfort, but because it offered her the perfect vantage point. She had come on this flight to observe, but she had not expected to become the subject. 3 weeks earlier, a series of internal reports had crossed her desk at Aeromira Technologies. Anonymous employee complaints. A whisper from a shareholder. A quiet email forwarded from the airline's own staff. The details were murky, but the implication was clear. Some first-class passengers of color, particularly black women, were being treated as if they didn't belong. Not overtly, not with slurs or threats, but with disbelief, suspicion, microaggressions disguised as protocol. It wasn't just bad PR, it was everything Janelle had spent 20 years fighting against. She could have investigated quietly, called board meetings, issued memos, but none of that would have shown her the truth. What she needed was to see what happened when she was just another woman in jeans and a hoodie, not Janelle Dawson, CEO of one of the most influential tech conglomerates in the country, not the silent partner who owned a significant stake in Altitude Air, just her, a face, a body, a name on a seat map. Now, here she was, exactly where she had planned to be, but in a way she never could have scripted. Dana stood by the galley now, whispering to Caleb. Their backs were to her, but their postures spoke volumes. Dana's spine rigid, Caleb's head tilted with casual dismissal. They were confident, unworried, smug. They had no idea who they were talking about, and that was exactly why she had come. Janelle closed her eyes for a brief moment. Let the tension roll through her. Let it pass. She had learned that early in life. How to breathe past the sting. How to collect herself without hardening. She didn't need to shout. She didn't need to prove anything, but she would not be silenced either. "Excuse me," came a soft voice beside her. Janelle opened her eyes to see a young woman standing a few feet away, uniformed, petite, eyes wide and nervous. Haley. Janelle recognized her. The junior attendant who had stood at the boarding door earlier, half in the shadows. I'm sorry," Haley whispered. "I saw your ticket scan valid when you boarded. I didn't say anything sooner because..." She trailed off. Her eyes darted toward Dana and Caleb. Janelle gave a gentle nod. "You did the right thing. Speaking now matters." Haley swallowed hard. Her voice trembled as she added, "They told me not to get involved, but I don't think this is right. It wasn't," and someone finally said it out loud. Before Janelle could respond, heavy footsteps echoed down the aisle. A man in a Navy pilot uniform emerged from the cockpit. Tall, mid-50s, silver hair, sharp eyes, his expression blank as stone. Captain Gregory Slade. He stopped beside Dana, who leaned in and whispered urgently. Caleb gestured toward Janelle. The captain's eyes followed. For a moment, he simply looked at her. No introduction, no questions, just that look. Then, flatly, he said, "Ma'am, I've been informed there's an issue with your seat assignment. We need you to return to economy so we can take off on time. No acknowledgement of her ID, no verification." Janelle turned slightly, meeting his gaze. "I've provided proof of my seat, twice. I understand, but we can't hold the flight for confusion. Please cooperate, or I'll be forced to request security." He said it so casually, as if removing a passenger was the simplest fix, as if being escorted out like a criminal was routine, expected, logical. Janelle didn't move. Around her, the cabin remained quiet, uncomfortably so. Eyes flicked between her and the captain, between her hoodie and her calm, unwavering stance. The air was no longer just tense. It was brittle. The captain raised an eyebrow. "Do I need to call someone, ma'am?" "You already have," Janelle replied softly. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. With practiced ease, she tapped a single contact. It rang once. Then a voice answered. "Ms. Dawson." "Yes, Mallory. It's happening." The voice on the other end grew sharp. "I'm looping in the board. Activating Protocol Clearview. Captain Slade blinked. Dana frowned. Caleb crossed his arms, confused. Janelle ended the call without further explanation and tucked the phone back into her pocket. Then she looked at the captain again. You may want to wait a moment before continuing this line of action. Slade didn't respond, but something in his posture changed. The shift was small, barely visible, but she saw it. So did Haley, still standing nearby, now visibly trembling. I don't understand, Slade said carefully. Are you saying? Before he could finish, a ringtone buzzed from the cockpit. Dana glanced at him. He stepped away. Janelle remained still. The moment hung in the air like a held breath. Haley took a step closer, her voice low. I'm sorry for what they did, for what they're doing. Janelle turned toward her. You don't have to apologize for them. I just don't want to lose my job, Haley said, barely above a whisper. But this, it isn't right. I've seen them treat other passengers like this too. People who don't fit the look. Janelle's gaze softened. She reached into her bag and pulled out her business card, slipped it into Haley's hand. Hold on to this, she said. Whatever happens next, you'll be all right. Haley nodded, eyes wide. Janelle turned her attention back to the front of the cabin. Slade was on the phone now, voice low, head turned. Dana stood stiff, arms crossed. Caleb leaned on the galley wall, still smirking, but the confidence was starting to fade. Behind her, the hum of the passengers' murmur was growing louder. Some were still filming. Some were whispering. Others just stared, caught in that space between discomfort and disbelief. Janelle stood at the center of it all, not as a victim, not as a symbol, but as a woman who had been here before and was done with being quiet. Whatever was about to happen next, she was ready. The cabin remained still, not the calm kind of still, not the peaceful quiet before a long-haul flight settles into routine. This was the tense kind, the kind of stillness that carried weight, questions, doubt, and something else too. Anticipation. Captain Slade had stepped into the cockpit just seconds earlier. The call he received had changed his posture, but not his expression. He had glanced back only once. Just once. But in that single look, Janelle saw everything, doubt, concern, and a flicker of recognition that he was no longer in control. Janelle remained standing in the aisle beside 2A. The seat was still empty. Her presence next to it now felt symbolic, even if she hadn't intended it to be. A protest without signs, a statement without volume. Haley stood a few feet behind her, silent, pale, gripping the edges of her uniform like it anchored her to the floor. Passengers in first class continued to steal glances. Some pretended to sleep. Others looked away, guilt curling at the edges of their silence. A young couple across the aisle had stopped their whispered conversation. Their eyes followed everything. No phones, no camera, just awareness. And then came the voice, over the intercom. This is your captain speaking. We are currently experiencing a short delay. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. Thank you for your patience. That was it. No explanation, no mention of weather or ground clearance, no apology, just an unexplained pause. But to Janelle, it was the beginning of a shift, because behind those words was fear, the kind of fear that comes not from chaos, but from accountability. She turned her gaze toward Dana and Caleb, who were no longer whispering. Dana was now leaning against the galley wall, one hand gripping her tablet, her jaw tight. Caleb was still trying to act casual, but the tips of his ears had turned red. He kept checking the front of the plane like someone waiting for backup that hadn't arrived. Janelle could see it happening, the unraveling. Power, when unchecked, often forgets it can be interrupted, but the interruption had arrived. She took out her phone and unlocked the screen. No camera, no speech, just a quiet scroll through the internal security feed that had just gone live. The flight was now under watch, in real time, by the Aeromira internal Oversight team. Mallory had activated Protocol Clearview exactly as instructed. Janelle had hoped it wouldn't be necessary, but that hope had faded the moment she saw Dana's eyes narrow at her during boarding. It had started with a glance, and now it had become a case. She slipped her phone back into her pocket. She had 5 minutes, maybe less, before someone official responded. Before legal counsel from the airline's holding company began to coordinate their damage control. Before the board called her, and so she stood still, let them sweat. Caleb made the first move. He stepped forward, his tone lower, almost diplomatic now, still patronizing but laced with uncertainty. "Ma'am, I think we can find a better solution here. If you just..." Janelle turned slightly to face him. "Not fully, just enough. Have you reviewed the seating manifest again?" He blinked. "Well, because it would tell you that this seat is registered to J. Dawson, Platinum Priority Clearance, first-class confirmation booked 4 weeks in advance through Executive Partner Tier allocation." His jaw shifted, a flicker of defensiveness. "And do you know what else it would tell you?" Caleb didn't answer. "It would tell you that J. Dawson is the majority voting stakeholder of the airline that signs your paycheck." Now, silence again, not just between them, but across the cabin. Even passengers in row 4 had turned their heads. Haley's eyes widened. Dana stood up straighter. Caleb's smirk vanished, replaced by a blink that lasted just a moment too long. "Wait," he said slowly. "You're saying..." But Janelle didn't wait. She finally stepped into her seat, sat down, fastened her belt. With the quiet confidence of someone who had always belonged there, the way she should have been able to do 20 minutes ago. Caleb took a step back. Janelle didn't look at him. Instead, she pulled out a small cloth pouch from her bag. Inside was a photo, folded, creased at the corners. It showed a young girl, maybe 8, sitting on a flight deck tour with a female pilot kneeling beside her, both beaming. The girl had curly braids. The pilot had olive skin and sharp cheekbones. Janelle held it in her hand. She didn't show it to anyone. But she looked at it, quietly. It was her and Captain Yara Shah, the first woman of color to captain an international commercial aircraft out of the northeastern U.S. The woman who told her, when she was 9 years old, that flying was about more than mechanics. It was about presence, visibility, belonging. And now, here she was, in 2A, not as a little girl with stars in her eyes, but as the woman who now protected others like that girl. She tucked the photo away, rested her hands on her lap, and exhaled. It was done. Not the situation. That was just beginning. But the moment where they could take anything else from her had passed. Captain Slade returned a minute later. His face looked different, less confident. He walked directly to Dana and whispered something. Dana's mouth parted in a small gasp. Her hand dropped the tablet. He said nothing to Janelle, but his eyes were cautious now. He knew. So did Caleb. The power had shifted. and they had no script for this version of the story. Janelle closed her eyes again, let herself feel everything: the sting, the rage, the restraint, and the stillness. She wasn't angry in the explosive way they expected. That's what confused people most about her. She didn't fight with fire. She fought with stillness so loud it silenced others. Across the aisle, the young couple finally spoke. The man leaned forward and said, quietly, "I'm sorry." Janelle turned to him. For what? He hesitated. For not saying something. When I saw it happening, Janelle offered a small, tired smile. "You see it now? Yeah. Then next time, say something. Early." He nodded, and it was enough, for now, because change starts with discomfort, and 5 minutes of silence can sometimes last longer than 5 years of noise. The cabin doors sealed a few minutes later. Engines revved. The plane began to taxi. Janelle leaned back in her seat, not victorious, but present, exactly where she intended to be, exactly who she had always been. By the time Flight 3827 reached cruising altitude, the tone in first class had shifted into something close to reverence. Not admiration, not yet, but caution, awareness. The quiet recalibration that happens when people realize they just witnessed the beginning of something bigger than a flight delay. Janelle sat still in 2A. Her seat finally claimed, not in victory, not in triumph, but in quiet presence. The silence she carried now was different than before. This one was protective, sacred, built from the fragments of every time she had been told to wait, to step aside, to make herself smaller. Now, she did not shrink. She breathed, the engines hummed around her, a low backdrop to the thoughts unraveling in her mind. She was used to being composed, to never let an emotion interrupt clarity, but today the balance felt off. She could feel her pulse behind her eyes, a pressure building that no altitude could smooth out. A soft knock came against her armrest. It was Haley. She crouched slightly, trying not to draw attention, though that effort was too late. Half the cabin had already watched her approach. "Miss Dawson," she said gently, "I wanted to... I'm sorry. I should have spoken up earlier. I knew it wasn't right." Janelle looked at her, and for the first time since boarding, her expression softened. "You paused," Janelle said. "I saw it. That's more than most." Haley nodded, her face folding inward with emotion. "But I didn't act. I should have." "Then act now," Janelle replied, her voice low. "Watch. Document. Tell the truth. Quietly if you must, but truthfully." Haley looked down. "I will, I promise." Janelle nodded once, letting the moment settle. She watched as Haley walked back toward the galley, her steps heavier now with the weight of new awareness. People like her were often caught in the crossfire between silence and survival. And sometimes the choice wasn't easy. Janelle knew that all too well. She had been Haley once, before boardrooms, before conferences, before her name was whispered in halls she'd been told were never meant for her. Janelle had started in the technical consulting, the only black woman in a department of 35. She had answered phones, filed reports, stayed late so her manager could leave early. She remembered the day she earned her first executive badge. No one had congratulated her. Her nameplate was spelled wrong, but she kept showing up, and she kept staying. She didn't fight for visibility. She fought to stay upright in spaces that tried to erase her without lifting a hand. Now she held equity in 5 aerospace firms, and she still had to explain why she had a right to sit down. She turned her head slightly and glanced toward Dana. The lead flight attendant was now seated behind the curtain, scrolling through her tablet, trying to appear busy. But Janelle could tell she was waiting for word, waiting for backup, waiting for a version of the story that might save her from what was coming. What none of them realized was that the story had already begun writing itself, and it was not going to be edited to suit their comfort. Janelle opened her phone again. A new message had appeared from Mallory. Board received incident report. PR drafting neutral position for now. I advise silence. Chair wants debrief when you land. HR pinged Altitude's union rep. Buckle up. She smiled faintly at the last line. Buckle up indeed. Janelle typed a short reply. Tell them I'm logging everything. No press release yet. Let the crew speak first. Then we correct the record. She locked the phone and slid it into her jacket pocket. Let the silence speak. Let them think she was done. Because she wasn't done. Not even close. A small boy began to cry somewhere behind the curtain, his voice high and afraid. Janelle listened to the mother shush him, her tone not annoyed but weary. The sound grounded her, reminded her that on this flight were people just trying to get home, just trying to reach someone or leave something behind. Not everyone aboard was a symbol. Some were just surviving. Janelle breathed in again and allowed herself to relax into the seat, finally letting it hold her. She leaned her head back and closed her eyes, but her mind did not rest. Instead, it took her somewhere else. 2 years ago. Terminal E, Newark. She had been standing near the departure gate when a TSA officer pulled her aside for a random search. It wasn't the first time. She had smiled, complied, even joked a little, trying to make it easy. But the man who followed her into secondary screening had kept staring. He had asked what she did for a living, not out of curiosity, but disbelief. When she answered, he laughed. You're too elegant to be in tech, he had said. I figured marketing or modeling, maybe. Janelle had stared at him, and she had said nothing, not because she lacked words, but because silence sometimes cuts deeper than correction. And she had never forgotten that moment. Now, in seat 2A, 35,000 feet above sea level, Janelle remembered every comment like that, not with bitterness, but precision. She cataloged them. They were the stones that built the foundation beneath her stillness. She opened her eyes again. Caleb had returned to the aisle. He hovered uncertainly near her row, pretending to check the overhead bins. He cleared his throat. Miss Dawson, may I offer you a beverage? Janelle turned to him slowly. Her voice was cool but calm. I'm fine. Of course, he said too quickly. He disappeared down the aisle. Haley passed by again, this time delivering drinks to another passenger. She made eye contact with Janelle, just for a second, then looked away. It was enough. A shift had begun, and Janelle wasn't going to push, not yet. She was going to let them make their moves, let the crew define themselves under pressure, because people always do, and when they did, she would respond not with volume, but with visibility. Behind her, a businessman leaned over the divider and whispered something to his wife. Janelle heard only fragments. That's her, the woman from the news, tech firm, billionaire. She didn't flinch. The whispers weren't new. What mattered now was what came next. Because while they were still in the air, the ground beneath these people was beginning to shift. A new message pinged across her phone screen. This one was from her lawyer. Do not engage further. Flight is under review. Await ground counsel at SFO. Full statement draft in progress. Internal footage secure. HR preparing emergency mediation. She replied with one line, "Understood, but I will not be silenced," because she had spent her entire life learning how to be heard without shouting. And now, the world was finally listening. The cabin lights dimmed as Flight 3827 soared above the Great Plains. Outside the windows, the sky had turned a dusky lavender, the last rays of the sun slipping beneath the curve of the earth. Inside, trays clinked gently as the crew moved through the aisles with mechanical rhythm, handing out meals to passengers who now watched Janelle with varying shades of curiosity, guilt, and something closer to awe. Janelle sat quietly, her fingers wrapped around a lukewarm cup of herbal tea. She hadn't asked for it. Haley had simply brought it to her without a word, placing the cup on her tray with a soft nod before vanishing again behind the first-class curtain. It was a small thing, but small things, when given in sincerity, carry weight. She sipped it slowly. Her mind, however, did not rest. She was thinking about what came next. She wasn't a stranger to confrontation. In boardrooms, on stages, in Senate hearings about tech monopolies, she had spoken plainly and decisively, but this confrontation had followed her into the sky, ambushed her in a space meant for restoration, a seat she had paid for, earned, deserved, and still, she had to fight to stay in it. It wasn't about the seat anymore. It was about the story it told. She felt it in her spine, the shift, the pressure before the descent. But they weren't descending yet. No, this was the quiet before. She reached into the side compartment of her bag and retrieved a small, navy blue notebook, worn leather, gold-edged pages. She flipped to a blank sheet and began to write. Not her statement, not yet. Just thoughts, raw, honest, unfiltered. She wrote, "There is a cost to being composed. They only see the stillness, not the screaming that comes before it." Then, below that, I wonder who else in this cabin has held back tears just to stay polite, to seem unbothered, to avoid becoming a story. She paused, chewing on the end of her pen. She didn't want to become the story, not in the way the media would twist it. They would pick sides before understanding the stakes. Was she too aggressive? Was she calm enough? Did she make the crew uncomfortable? Was she the reason people were uneasy? They would not ask why she had to justify her presence in a seat she owned. They would not ask why Dana had made assumptions. They would not ask how often it happened, or to how many other people with quiet skin and loud dignity. They would just ask if she overreacted. Janelle closed the notebook and placed it beside her. Her gaze wandered across the cabin. A man in 2C caught her eye. He wore a gray blazer over a blue hoodie and had spent most of the flight pretending not to watch her. But now he nodded, just once. Respectful. She returned the gesture. Then, to her surprise, he leaned slightly over the divider and said, "My wife follows your work. She showed me your panel with Dr. Luan at Stanford last fall. I didn't recognize you at first." Janelle offered a small smile. "That's all right. Most people know my name before my face." He chuckled quietly. "I'm embarrassed I didn't step in earlier. I wasn't sure what was happening, but I saw how Dana looked at you. I've seen that look before. Not just on flights. You're not the one who needs to be embarrassed," she said, "but thank you." He extended his hand slightly. "Raj Patel. My wife's name is Selena. She works in AI ethics. She thinks you're rewriting the playbook. I'm just rewriting my own," Janelle said softly. He nodded. That's how playbooks change. The exchange grounded her. Moments like this human, unforced, were the real armor. Not press releases, not corporate apologies, the humanity beneath the politics. That's what gave her the strength to keep going. A ding echoed overhead as the captain's voice came through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Walter speaking. We've reached our midpoint and are on course to arrive in San Francisco 10 minutes ahead of schedule. Weather looks good at destination. For those in first class, the crew will begin clearing trays shortly. Thank you for flying. Altitude Air." Janelle heard the crew begin to move again. Dana's voice returned, this time over the cabin intercom. Professional, cool, almost robotic. "If you'd like to enjoy dessert, please raise your hand and we'll begin service shortly." The theater of hospitality had resumed, but it was hollow now. People responded politely, raised hands, thank yous. Janelle did not move. She wasn't hungry for dessert. She was hungry for truth. Haley returned again, this time with a tray of small fruit tarts and coffee. She paused at Janelle's row. "I brought this in case," she said gently. "Thank you," Janelle replied, taking the plate without looking. Haley hesitated. "I spoke with Dana," she said under her breath. "She's worried, but not about what she did, about what might happen to her." "That sounds about right," Janelle said, her tone even. She said, "You're blowing it out of proportion." Janelle looked up, her eyes steady. "I haven't said a word since takeoff, but the truth echoes louder than silence." Haley nodded. "I believe you." Then she added, "You're not the first." Janelle's stomach tensed. "What do you mean last month? A man? Black? Upgraded to business?" She asked to see his ID 3 times, said his tone made her uncomfortable. He never raised his voice. I watched. "Did anything happen?" Haley looked down. He left the plane. Janelle's breath caught. She blinked hard, her jaw tightening. "How many more?" she asked. Voice nearly a whisper. Haley hesitated. "More than I want to admit." The silence between them thickened. Then Janelle leaned closer. "Thank you for telling me. I'll go on record if you need me to." Janelle nodded. "I will remember that." Haley disappeared down the aisle again, her posture straighter now, like something had broken free inside her. Janelle turned to the window. Outside, dusk had faded to dark. Below them, cities twinkled like distant galaxies. She could almost imagine the lives unfolding beneath them, conversations over dinner tables, children falling asleep. Someone waiting at gate 12 with tired eyes and a bouquet of supermarket roses. Life was happening all around her, and here, suspended in air, she was deciding how to respond. This wasn't just a viral moment, this was a mirror, and it was reflecting more than just her. She picked up her notebook again, and she wrote, "When a system breaks, people pretend it's isolated, but these are not incidents. They are patterns, repeated, protected, denied, until someone stays seated long enough to be heard." She paused, then wrote the final line for the night. "I will not rise for their comfort. I will remain. Still, present, visible." She closed the notebook and looked forward. Descent would come soon. But before they landed, the truth had already touched down. The seatbelt sign dinged softly as the aircraft began its slow, calculated descent. Outside the windows, the stars above Nevada blinked like whispers from a different universe. while the land below glowed with grids of golden light stretching across the desert. Janelle Dawson felt the shift in altitude not just in her ears, but in her chest. Pressure, that unmistakable feeling of gravity returning. The quiet moments before landing had always been a kind of ritual for her, a time of reflection, a bridge between departure and arrival, between who she was when she boarded and who she might become by the time the wheels touched earth. But this time, the reflection was heavier than ever before. She opened her notebook again. The tea on her tray had gone cold, untouched. The dessert sat in silence too, ignored like the versions of herself she used to entertain just to keep others comfortable. The words she had written earlier still hovered in her mind. Patterns, not incidents. She knew this wasn't just about Dana Bryce, not just about one crew, not even one airline. It was about how easily a system convinced itself it was fair simply because it smiled while excluding you. As if soft voices made sharp edges dull. As if politeness erased prejudice. She breathed slowly through her nose and reached into her carry-on for her phone. She scrolled to her Notes app and opened a file labeled Statement Template. But her fingers hovered above the screen. This was not a press statement moment. Not yet. She wasn't ready to hand the narrative over to the news cycle. She needed to know what felt true. She needed to sit with the discomfort before the world digested it into sound bites. Across the aisle, Raj Patel was watching her again. He didn't speak this time, just offered another quiet nod. Janelle returned it. She appreciated the stillness in his presence, the way he didn't demand access to her pain, just witnessed it. The curtain at the front of first class shifted again. Dana emerged, clipboard in hand, moving down the aisle row by row. She was doing what flight attendants do before landing, final checks, clearance notes. But when she reached Janelle's seat, she paused longer than necessary. "Ms. Dawson, I want to thank you for your cooperation today." Her tone was measured, too measured. Janelle looked up, calm but unblinking. "Is that what you think this was?" Cooperation, Dana faltered just slightly, then corrected her posture. "You remained composed. I appreciate that." Janelle didn't respond right away. Then she said quietly, "I didn't remain composed for your appreciation." Dana opened her mouth to speak, but Janelle raised a hand gently, not to silence her, but to stop the spin. "Let me ask you something," Janelle said. "If I hadn't pushed back, if I had simply gotten up and moved without explanation, would this have mattered to you at all?" Dana's eyes flickered. It was the look of someone walking a tightrope between company loyalty and personal discomfort. "I was following procedure," Dana said finally. "Whose procedure?" Janelle asked. "The airline's, or your own silence?" "You looked at me and saw a risk," Janelle continued. "Not a customer, not a CEO, not a woman exhausted from 15 years of building something from scratch. You saw a black woman in a seat you didn't expect her to be in. So you tried to move the problem instead of questioning the problem's existence." Dana drew a quiet breath. "I've worked for this airline for 19 years. I've trained over 60 new hires." Janelle raised her gaze again, steady but soft. "And yet you still couldn't recognize your own bias." Dana's mouth opened again, but no words came. For a moment, Janelle almost felt sorry for her, not because Dana deserved pity, but because she saw in Dana what she had seen in so many others, people who had never truly examined their lens, people who had inherited silence and called it neutrality. Dana stepped back. "We'll be landing soon. Thank you for your feedback." She disappeared down the aisle before Janelle could respond. The cabin lights flickered on as the plane prepared for its final descent. Announcements played in multiple languages. The familiar corporate jingle chimed softly over the intercom. Janelle fastened her seatbelt and closed her eyes for a moment. She could feel the tremor of something bigger stirring inside her. Not rage, not bitterness, but resolve. It wasn't the first time she'd been tested like this, but maybe it would be the last time she let it pass without consequence. Her phone buzzed on the tray table. A new message from her assistant. "Kira, just saw something trending. Everything okay?" Janelle opened her browser and typed her name into the search bar. There it was. A passenger on Flight 3827 had started recording after the confrontation began. The footage had already gone viral. The caption read, "Black woman in first class asked to prove she belonged. Guess who she is?" The video had over 3 million views in under an hour. The comments were a storm. Some defensive, some outraged, some inspired, some already digging up her past appearances on CNBC, TEDx, and policy panels. She had become the story again, whether she liked it or not. Janelle leaned back against her headrest and let out a breath. The plane began its descent. The city lights of San Francisco came into view, sharp and silver, like diamonds on a black velvet cloth. As the cabin tilted forward, Janelle's heart steadied. She opened her notes app again. This time, she began to type. "The crew of Flight 3827 asked me to prove I belonged. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't leave my seat. I didn't become the threat they expected. I became the witness they feared." She paused, then added, "The question was never whether I belonged in 1A. The question is why that seat still makes people uncomfortable when someone like me occupies it." Her fingers moved faster now. This is not just about a flight. This is about every hallway, office, boardroom, and ballot box that still treats visibility as a disturbance. I'm not here to disturb you. I'm here because I earned it, because my presence should not require proof. She hit save, then closed her phone. The plane touched down with a gentle thud. Janelle opened her eyes. Arrival? She'd landed in more ways than one. The terminal felt colder than it should have. Janelle Dawson stepped onto the jet bridge, her carry-on rolling quietly behind her. The walls of the passageway curved like the inside of a seashell, amplifying every footstep, every breath. For a moment, she hoped she might slip through unnoticed. But as she emerged into the bright lights of San Francisco International Airport's gate, 14B, a cluster of people waiting at the glass barrier turned in her direction. One woman gasped audibly. A young man raised his phone. Another pointed. That's her. That's the woman from the flight. First class. It had taken less than 90 minutes for her face to become a symbol again. A headline. A viral stand-in for everything that still went unspoken. Janelle adjusted her blazer and kept walking, her stride even, her face unreadable. It wasn't the first time she'd been filmed without permission. Wouldn't be the last. But this time, the footage wasn't from a conference stage. It wasn't a keynote. It was a quiet act of refusal caught in real time. She passed under a welcome banner strung across the terminal ceiling. "Welcome to San Francisco, the city of innovation." She almost laughed. The irony wasn't lost on her. Her phone buzzed. Another message from Kira. Media's calling. MSNBC, Axios, The Post. Also, a statement request from the airline. "I told them you're not ready to comment yet. Janelle didn't respond. She kept walking. To her right, a child in a stroller waved at her, a small gesture, pure, human. She waved back with a gentle smile. Near baggage claim. She spotted Raj Patel again. He had waited for her. "You okay?" he asked softly. "That depends on your definition." He gave a quiet chuckle. "Mine's flexible." Janelle exhaled, the first breath that felt natural in hours. She appreciated the restraint in his eyes. No probing questions, no performance of concern. Just presence. "You were brave," he said. "I wasn't trying to be brave. I was trying to stay seated. Sometimes that's all it takes." She nodded. Her eyes caught movement ahead. A man in a navy blue blazer stood near the carousel, holding a tablet with her name on it. Janelle Dawson. Black letters, bold and plain. Her driver. He spotted her and approached. "Ms. Dawson, I've got your car waiting outside. No rush. Thank you." She turned to Raj. "You flying home. No layover. Headed to Seattle next. But I'll be watching what you do. You've got people paying attention now. Might as well make it count." Janelle met his eyes. "That's the plan." They shook hands. His palm was warm, steady. Then he turned and disappeared into the crowd. Her driver walked beside her silently. Outside, the car waited, engine humming. As the door shut behind her and the city lights filtered through the tinted windows, she finally let herself lean back. The leather was cool against her neck. Her pulse still hadn't fully settled. The car moved forward. Downtown shimmered in the distance like a promise she hadn't yet decided whether to keep. She pulled out her phone again. Messages filled the screen. Friends, colleagues, strangers. A few were simple. "Saw what happened, with you all the way." Others were more loaded. "This is your moment. Speak loud, burn it down." One message caught her off guard. It was from her mother. "Don't let them make you small. Your grandmother didn't march in heels so you could apologize in first class." Janelle felt her throat tighten. She remembered her grandmother's stories. The lunch counters, the stare-downs, the ways dignity had to be claimed, again and again, because no one gave it freely. She opened her camera app, not to record a video, just to look at herself. She studied the face in the reflection. Tired, but calm, wounded, but resolute. She thought back to the moment Dana Bryce had asked her to produce proof. That casual cruelty. The expectation that her compliance would be automatic. That she would choose peace over confrontation. Erasure over truth. She hadn't. And now the world had noticed. She didn't want a spectacle. But she couldn't walk away from the opportunity either. She opened her notes app again and typed tomorrow morning. "I want to meet with Altitude Air's board liaison. Quietly, before the press gets louder than the truth." Then she added, "And I want the meeting recorded." The car pulled up in front of her building. Sleek glass, minimalist design. A doorman she'd known for 6 years nodded and opened the door. "Welcome home, Miss Dawson." "Thank you, Joseph." Inside her penthouse, everything was still, clean, ordered, but her mind wasn't. She changed into a soft cotton hoodie and sweatpants, poured herself a glass of water, sat on the balcony overlooking the bay. The city buzzed in the distance. Somewhere across the ocean, other flights were taking off, other women were being questioned, others were calculating how much dignity they could afford to lose before speaking up. Janelle watched the sky for a long time, then she whispered to no one in particular. Not this time. She returned inside, opened her laptop, Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She didn't want a viral moment. She wanted a movement, and maybe, just maybe, this would be the beginning. The conference room sat on the 22nd floor of Altitude Air's West Coast Regional Office. Frosted glass framed the entry, but inside, the walls were solid. No windows, no distractions, just a long oval table, 6 leather chairs, and a quiet hum from the ceiling vent. Janelle Dawson sat with her back straight, palms resting lightly on the table's polished surface. Her black suit was crisp, collar neat, her gold watch ticking evenly as if time itself respected her posture. Across from her sat Lionel Kerr, Vice President of Client Relations, appointed liaison for what the airline was now calling the incident on Flight 3827. He wasn't what she expected. No smugness, no overdone apologies. Just a man in his mid-50s with soft eyes and a tired kind of intelligence. His tie was loose at the neck. He had reviewed her file. That was clear. "Ms. Dawson," he began, "thank you for agreeing to meet under such private conditions. I hope you understand. We wanted to keep this between us until we can properly review internal documentation." "Internal documentation," she repeated. "You mean the footage your airline staff didn't know a child in seat 14A recorded? Or the part where your head attendant publicly asked me to prove I belonged in my own seat?" Kerr shifted in his chair. Yes, that part. A beat of silence stretched between them. He was trying to read her, measure her temperament. Janelle made sure to give him nothing. "We've begun a review of the situation," he continued. "The crew has been temporarily relieved of active duty. We've spoken to legal, and we are prepared to extend a formal apology once the investigation concludes. We take these matters seriously." Janelle lifted one brow. "Let me ask you something, Mr. Kerr. Do you believe this happened because of a one-time failure in protocol or because protocol never really protected people like me to begin with?" Kerr blinked. The question wasn't rhetorical. It hung there like smoke in still air. He replied slowly, "I believe this happened because sometimes the systems we rely on are only as good as the people who enforce them. And people fail. People," she echoed, "or prejudice." He didn't argue. "We've already had calls from media outlets," he said. "As you may know, the video is circulating. You handled the situation with restraint. That's not always the case." Janelle leaned forward slightly. Her voice remained calm but precise. "You're trying to compliment my poise, but what you're really saying is you're relieved I didn't escalate, that I didn't shout or cry or demand the plane be turned around." Kerr hesitated, then gave a half nod. "Yes." She let the truth settle. "Let me be clear," she continued. "This isn't about one crew member, or even 5. This is about the cultural permission embedded in your training manual. I was calm because I have to be, because if I breathe wrong at 30,000 feet, I become a threat. I become a disruption. I become a headline you don't get to control." Kerr listened without interruption. "I'm not here for a refund," she added. "I'm not here for your PR apology. I'm here because your airline made a decision to humiliate a paying customer in front of a full cabin and only changed course when they realized she had power. What if I wasn't CEO of a major firm? What if I was just another black woman, traveling home to bury her mother or visit her child or attend a job interview?" Kerr looked down at his folder, then closed it. "What do you want us to do, Miss Dawson?" Her reply came without pause. I want public accountability, not just from Dana Bryce, but from your policies. I want every flight attendant retrained with implicit bias modules. I want anonymous feedback systems on every long-haul route. And I want every future complaint reviewed by a panel that includes people of color and not just white legal counsel with quarterly bonuses. Kerr exhaled slowly. That's a significant request. It's not a request, she said evenly. It's a roadmap. One you can follow willingly, or one I will read aloud tomorrow at a live press conference on the courthouse steps. For the first time, he looked rattled. You're planning a press conference already set. 10 a.m. City Hall. You have until 9:30 to call it off. He leaned back. Processing. You're not bluffing. She met his gaze without flinching. You think I'd put myself through a viral takedown for attention? I run 2 companies, Mr. Kerr. I am not a TikTok influencer. I'm someone who knows exactly how public perception becomes policy. I've watched companies bend when the world's eyes are on them. I've made them bend. Silence filled the room again. This time it was Kerr who looked out of place. She almost felt a flicker of pity. Almost. He finally said, May I have a few hours? You have until tomorrow morning. She stood, straightened her blazer, collected her tablet. One more thing, Mr. Kerr. He looked up. I want the crew permanently removed, not just reassigned to night routes. I want it documented, transparent. Otherwise, I will name every individual who made a decision against me, from seat reassignment to tone of voice. Kerr nodded once, understood. She turned and left the room without looking back. In the elevator, her fingers trembled slightly, the adrenaline finally catching up. Her body had done what it needed to do. Stay calm, speak clearly, maintain control. But her mind reeled. Was this the best way? Would she be painted as aggressive? Would the public support her or call her overreactive? Her phone buzzed. A message from Kira. Team standing by. Press kits ready. You sure about this, boss? She didn't reply. Not yet. Outside the building, a breeze swept across the pavement. She stood still for a long moment, letting the wind carry some of the tension away. Then she walked to her car. Inside the back seat, she finally opened the child's video again. She watched her own face. The moment Dana Bryce asked her to prove she belonged. The tightness in her jaw, the restraint in her words, and then the turning point. When she opened her tablet and said 6 quiet words, "You'll want to be very careful." It was quiet but undeniable, her shift from guest to force. She closed the video, closed her eyes, and whispered to herself, "You were right to speak." Tomorrow the world would hear her again. The sun hadn't risen yet. Outside her window, San Francisco's skyline still shimmered in the dim pre-dawn light, bridges tracing silver overshadowed water. Janelle Dawson stood at her kitchen counter with a half-finished mug of black coffee. She had barely slept. Her tablet blinked with unread messages, news outlets, civil rights groups, corporate sponsors, a few offers to go on live morning TV. She ignored them all. In front of her lay a single folded letter, handwritten, unsent. To my younger self, she had titled it. She read the last line again for the 3rd time. You do not owe them grace when they deny you dignity. It had been a hard letter to write, but maybe harder to read, because despite the strength she showed in that closed meeting room, her chest still ached with that quiet question she never voiced aloud. What if it's too much? What if it all breaks back on me? Her phone buzzed gently. Kira's message was brief. Mic check at 8:15. Crowd is growing. You okay, boss? Janelle didn't reply. She walked slowly toward her living room where a navy blue dress and black heels were laid neatly on the arm of the couch. She had worn this exact outfit 3 years ago, the day she rang the opening bell on Wall Street for Dawson Ventures. She remembered how she stood that morning in front of glass and ticker tape, feeling like her mother's prayers had finally found their landing, and today she would wear it again, but for a different kind of declaration. The intercom buzzed. Security downstairs. Time to go. She took one last look in the mirror. Her face was calm, but her eyes carried the weight of thousands. On the elevator ride down, she didn't speak. Her guards didn't either. Not because of protocol, but out of respect. Everyone could feel something bigger than reputation was at stake now. City Hall was a 10-minute drive. They passed block after block of buildings she once walked past in silence. Coffee shops where investors first turned her down. Offices where no one remembered her name. Storefronts that once barely glanced up when she entered. Now people lined the sidewalks with signs. Altitude, accountability. We see you, Janelle. Respect is not optional. Kira met her at the car. It's different now, Janelle said softly. It should be. Kira replied. The press area had been carefully arranged with velvet ropes and staggered standing zones. Kira guided her through the backstage tent and handed her a folded card. You don't have to use this, she said, but I prepped a version in case the emotions take over. Janelle took the card but didn't look at it. Behind the curtain, she could hear murmurs, a few protesters, mostly supporters. Some cameras already live streaming. The air felt thick with expectancy. She looked up. What if I fail? Kira tilted her head. Fail who, myself? Or the ones watching, hoping I'll say what they've wanted to say for years. Kira touched her arm. Then speak like they're standing next to you. A nod. Then the curtain was drawn back. Janelle walked out onto the small platform. No teleprompter. Just a wooden podium and a bank of microphones. A hush rippled across the crowd as they saw her. Phone cameras lifted. She inhaled once, then spoke. My name is Janelle Dawson, and I was removed from my seat in first class because someone thought I did not belong there. There was no sound, not even a cough. I was asked to show proof, not proof of payment, but proof of identity, proof that I had earned what I did not need to earn, proof that I was not a threat. She paused. Let that sentence sit. I remained calm, not because I wasn't angry, but because I knew what could happen if I wasn't, because for people who look like me, calm is survival. She scanned the audience, her voice never raised, but it did grow heavier. What happened on Flight 3827 is not just about a misunderstanding. It is about a system that teaches suspicion before service, that trains discomfort before decency, that protects itself before protecting its passengers. Today, I am not here as a CEO. I am here as someone's daughter, someone's niece, someone's friend who knows exactly what it feels like to be judged in silence, to be told you are too much and not enough in the same breath. She turned slightly toward the cameras. This is not only about me. This is about every black woman told to smile more when she's exhausted, to sit down when she's already been walking for miles, to prove herself twice before she's even greeted once. We deserve seats we don't have to explain. Applause rippled, then built. She let the sound rise, then raised her hand gently to return to stillness. This morning, Altitude Air issued a private statement offering compensation and apologies. I have declined both. Instead, I have submitted a list of internal reforms. She listed them clearly: bias training, anonymous reporting, review panels, a cultural reset from the bottom up, no fluff, no vague promises. These aren't suggestions, she said. These are non-negotiables, and they come not from ego, but from experience. Because I've spent a lifetime being told to wait for fairness. But fairness delayed is dignity denied. Her voice faltered just slightly on the word dignity, but she did not look away. To the young girl in seat 14A who filmed that video, thank you. Your eyes caught what others missed. You reminded us that sometimes justice begins with just watching closely. And to those who still believe silence is safer than truth, I invite you to reconsider. Change does not begin in boardrooms. It begins here, with people who choose visibility over comfort. She stepped back from the podium. No dramatic exit, no flourish, just stillness. Then a quiet exhale. The crowd erupted, cameras flashing, people rising, a few crying. But Janelle didn't look to the crowd for validation. She looked up at the sky, the same one she had flown beneath, the one that had once felt like a ceiling. Today, it felt like a floor she could stand firmly on. The applause from City Hall still echoed in her ears long after Janelle stepped back into her car. No one spoke as the driver pulled away. San Francisco's early light stretched shadows across the windshield. Her fingers rested on her lap, still trembling faintly. The words she had spoken weren't just heard, they had landed. She could feel it in the weight of the silence around her. Kira sat beside her, unusually quiet. Not out of awkwardness, but reverence. She knew better than anyone what it had cost Janelle to stand before the city and speak truth without hiding behind titles or credentials. The quiet was broken when Janelle's phone began vibrating nonstop. Notifications poured in, hundreds of messages, dozens of interview requests. Her name was now trending worldwide. Janelle turned it off. She didn't want screens, not right now. Not when her heart was still catching up to her voice. At home, she dropped her keys into the ceramic bowl by the front door and slowly removed her heels. Her body ached in places success had never touched. Behind the power suit and well-practiced posture, she was just tired. Tired in that cellular way only black women understood. A kind of fatigue passed down through generations. A knowing ache. She moved toward the kitchen, but paused as she noticed the red light blinking on her landline. Only a few people still used it. Mostly older friends or people who had known her before Dawson Ventures became a headline. She pressed play. Janelle. This is Professor Langston. I don't know if you remember me from Howard. I just watched your speech. I need you to know something. She froze, her hand still hovering over the counter. Professor Langston had taught her African American literature. He had introduced her to Baldwin, Morrison, and Du Bois. He was the first professor to tell her that rage could be sacred and soft, that language could be both weapon and balm. She had not heard from him in 12 years. The message continued. Back in 2007, I applied to consult with Altitude Air, DEI work. I wrote a whole plan. They took it, used the language, the graphs, the terms, then said I wasn't what their image needed. A younger white woman got the contract. He paused for breath. I buried it. Buried a lot, actually. But you, today, you unearthed what I thought would never be seen. Thank you. Click. Janelle sank into a nearby chair. She didn't cry, not right away, but her body folded in gently, as if the recognition alone had loosened a knot that had lived quietly in her chest for years. There it was, proof that this wasn't new, that the injustice wasn't sudden, it had simply found its moment. She whispered softly to the empty room, "You weren't invisible, just early." Later that night, Kira returned with takeout and updates. The airline finally issued a public statement. Apology. Video message from the CEO. It was sanitized. Janelle raised an eyebrow. And they're forming a committee. Invited you to join. Said your leadership and lived experience are invaluable. Janelle exhaled through her nose, a sound of both amusement and frustration. Let me guess, no equity stake, no voting power, just a seat on a panel they built for PR. Pretty much, Kira replied. There was a pause. I'm not going, Kira added. Unless you are. Janelle smiled faintly, a small curve that didn't quite reach her eyes. She opened the takeout box, something spicy and familiar, comfort food disguised as business dinner. They ate in silence for a few moments before Janelle finally asked, "Did you ever think we'd be here?" Kira took a sip of water before answering. Honestly, I thought we'd be further by now, but part of me always knew it would take someone like you to crack the silence. Janelle looked out the window, across the bay. Lights shimmered like small truths waiting to be spoken. That night, as she lay in bed, sleep came slowly. Her mind kept turning not on the speech or the headlines, but on Professor Langston's voice. I buried it. That sentence replayed in her mind, over and over. She thought of how many buried stories lined boardrooms and check-in counters and security screenings. How many truths were stifled by fear, and how many people, like her, had been told to be grateful for access instead of angry about mistreatment. The next morning, a letter arrived, not an email, a real envelope, hand-addressed. She opened it cautiously. Inside was a short note on embossed cream stationery. Janelle, I was on flight 3827. I was sitting in 4C across the aisle. I saw everything and I said nothing. I regret it deeply. I have since submitted my full account to your team. I want you to know I believe every word you said. Sincerely, James Cho. She sat down. That seat, 4C, she remembered it clearly. The man with the tablet, dressed in a quiet suit, the one who averted his gaze when the flight attendant questioned her ticket, who watched but did not intervene. It stirred something in her. Not anger, not forgiveness either. Something else. The reminder that silence has eyes. She filed the letter next to the other documents her legal team was collecting, not to weaponize, but to preserve, to show the full anatomy of a moment. She had asked the world to watch, and now the world was blinking awake. Her email pinged again. This time it was from a major advocacy group. They wanted her to speak at an international summit, Human Dignity in Corporate Systems, a topic they had originally scheduled someone else for. But now, they said, her name meant something more. She closed the laptop. It wasn't about stages, or headlines, or trending hashtags. It was about memory, about how we hold it, protect it, speak it. Later that evening, she walked to her mother's old house, a modest brownstone tucked into a quiet neighborhood where the trees had names and the mailman knew every dog. She stood on the porch for a long time before ringing the bell. Her aunt answered. Wrinkled hands, sharp eyes. "You ready to eat something other than boardroom food?" she said. Janelle smiled and stepped inside. There was no speech, no cameras, just gumbo on the stove, family photos on the wall, and a handwritten recipe from her mother still taped above the sink. They ate in silence. Then her aunt spoke softly. "You're carrying a lot, child." Janelle nodded. "But I'm not carrying it alone." Her aunt reached across the table and took her hand. "No, now the world sees. That makes all the difference." And in that small kitchen, beneath the smell of garlic and thyme, Janelle felt something deeper than victory. She felt visibility. The invitation came on embossed paper, not email. An executive assistant had called Kira directly and asked that Janelle attend a confidential meeting with the Altitude Air Board of Directors. No press, no live stream, just a closed-door conversation in the top-floor conference room of the airline's headquarters. Janelle studied the envelope for a long time before opening it. She already knew what it would say. Words like collaborative opportunity and mutual resolution floated on expensive cardstock. But no apology. Not in print. She arrived alone. No entourage. No legal team in tow. Just a fitted navy suit, a pearl brooch that belonged to her grandmother, and a leather folder tucked under one arm. She stepped out of the elevator and was greeted by silence. Not the respectful kind, the waiting kind, the calculating kind. A receptionist stood and gestured toward a large, frosted glass door. "They're expecting you, Ms. Dawson." The door clicked open and Janelle entered the room. 12 people sat around the long polished table, all of them executives. 11 men, 1 woman, all white. She took her seat across from the chairman, who wore a crisp gray suit and an expression meant to appear empathetic. His eyes betrayed him. They didn't soften when he looked at her. They calculated. "Thank you for joining us, Ms. Dawson," he said. Janelle gave a small nod. "We'd like to begin by acknowledging your experience and the powerful impact of your public statement." Janelle kept her voice steady. It wasn't a statement, it was a memory. He faltered for a beat before continuing. "We'd like to explore a path forward, one that allows for healing, for partnership." She opened her folder. Inside were 4 documents. She placed them on the table and slid them toward him. "This is a copy of the full flight report, a notarized affidavit from a witness, the internal email chain between your cabin crew and base operations, and a transcript of the so-called training your staff received last year." He looked down. His fingers tightened slightly on the table. "You already have this," Janelle said. "I know, but I brought it here so we could begin from the same place." The truth. A younger executive to his left leaned forward. "Ms. Dawson, your experience is not reflective of our company's values." She turned to him slowly. "Then why did 4 staff members sign off on it before takeoff, and not one intervene until I opened a lawsuit?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. The woman at the end of the table tried a different approach. "We've seen tremendous response since your speech, and we want to honor that. We're prepared to offer you a position on our new Equity Advisory Board, with an annual honorarium." Janelle blinked slowly. "You want me to sit on a panel, for a fee, while the same team that approved discrimination stays in charge?" The room went still. The chairman leaned forward. "What do you want, Ms. Dawson?" She met his gaze. Calm, certain. "I want accountability. Public. Not buried in committee minutes." He bristled. "That's not how this works." Janelle leaned forward. "It is now." He tried to smile. "Let's be reasonable." She didn't flinch. I was reasonable when I bought my ticket, when I waited in line, when I showed ID, when I was asked to move because I did not look like someone who belongs in first class. She placed a photograph on the table. It was her mother, standing in front of a grocery store with a handwritten sign from 1963 that read, "I am a person." My mother carried that sign so I could carry mine in courtrooms and on stages. I will not shrink it to fit your PR strategy. One of the board members stood abruptly. "With all due respect, you're being combative." "No," Janelle said. "I'm being clear. You're not used to that from someone like me." The room shifted. The power dynamic was no longer theoretical. It was happening. Quietly. Relentlessly. She was not just holding her ground. She was shaping it. She stood and gathered her documents. "Here's my offer." They looked up. "You issue a full apology. With names, not vague statements about experience. You implement a binding third-party audit of your entire hiring and training program. You tie executive bonuses to equity benchmarks, and you invest in passenger protections beyond a hollow diversity clause." One of them scoffed. "That would require rewriting our governance bylaws." Janelle smiled faintly. "Yes, it would." She turned to leave, then paused. "And one more thing. Your head of customer operations. She is on recorded audio asking a gate agent why I was booked in 2A. Her words were, 'And no one caught that she does not stay.'" The chairman stood. "That's not your decision to make." She turned to face him fully. "It is when I fund the legal action that will cost you 4 times more than it would to listen." The room fell silent again. She walked to the door, but before exiting, she looked back one last time. "This is not about revenge. It's about remembering. Every woman who came before me. Every child who will come after. I don't need your committee. I need your courage." And then she left. In the hallway, Kira was waiting. She raised an eyebrow. "Well," Janelle exhaled, "they heard me. Not sure they listened, but they heard me." She stepped into the elevator and leaned against the mirrored wall. Her reflection looked back at her, tired, unyielding, whole. Back in the car, she finally turned her phone back on. Messages flooded in. One in particular caught her eye. It was from a woman named Estelle, a single mother from Detroit who had watched her speech online with her teenage daughter. The message was short. "My daughter has never seen a black woman speak with that kind of fire and grace. She asked me if you were a real person. I told her yes, and she smiled like she had seen the future." Janelle read it twice. Then she looked out the window. The city passed in quiet fragments. Streets she used to walk. Buildings she once dreamed of entering. Now she stood at the head of the very tables that once shut their doors to her. She closed her eyes. She was not done. But she was no longer beginning either. 6 months had passed. The headlines had faded, but the change had not. Altitude Air had implemented the reforms, not all at once, not perfectly, but undeniably. The diversity clause in their hiring policies had been rewritten. Third-party oversight had begun. More importantly, the internal language had shifted. No more passenger profile flags, no more whispers of fit and image. The quiet parts were no longer said out loud. They were no longer allowed at all. The woman who once tried to have Janelle removed from her seat was no longer part of the airline. She had been quietly dismissed with no severance package. The official reason cited policy violation. But Janelle knew the real reason. It was a choice. A line drawn. Janelle had not spoken publicly since that boardroom meeting. She declined every follow-up interview, every late-night appearance, every Woman of the Year feature. She did not need the spotlight. Her light had already reached the people who needed it. She had moved back to Georgia. The brownstone she grew up in had long since been sold by the city. But she found a quiet craftsman home near the old library she used to walk to as a girl. It had a wraparound porch, 3 chairs, and enough space for silence. Every morning, she made coffee the slow way, no assistant, no timer, no press release, just Janelle, the soft gurgle of the kettle, and the sun beginning to touch the porch rail. On Thursdays, she visited the local high school, not to give speeches, not to be seen. She sat in the back of Ms. Bryant's classroom during debate club. She watched the girls speak, some with fire, some with fear, but every week one more voice found its footing. One afternoon, as the students gathered their backpacks and laughter echoed down the hallway, Ms. Bryant lingered. "You've changed something in them," she said softly. Janelle shrugged. "They changed themselves. I just sat still long enough for them to hear their own voices. At night," she read, not case files, not industry reports. She read Baldwin, Lord, Zora Neale Hurston, and sometimes romance novels her mother once hid under couch cushions when guests came by. Words had always been her companions. Now they were her comfort. The one thing she had not done was fly, not since that day. The irony was not lost on her. She had built an empire on movement, on reaching every corner of the country. And now she stayed grounded, not out of fear, but out of something deeper, a kind of reflection, a pause. Then came the letter. It was handwritten, on lined notebook paper. The envelope was postmarked from New Mexico. "Dear Ms. Dawson, you don't know me, but my name is Nia. I'm 17. I want to thank you. Last month, I flew for the first time in my life. I'm a foster kid. I got adopted last year by a woman who saw me playing trumpet at a street fair. She said I reminded her of her sister who passed. When we boarded the plane to visit her family, I was nervous. I don't look like most girls in the boarding line. But something happened. The flight attendant who greeted us said, 'Welcome aboard.' And then she added, 'You look like you're ready to fly the world.' No one's ever said that to me." I asked her later why she said it. She said her company changed a lot after a black woman refused to give up her seat. That was you. Right. So I just wanted to say, thank you for not giving up your seat, or your voice, or your dignity. Because now I know I can sit anywhere, even in the front. Love. Nia Harper. Janelle folded the letter and placed it inside a leather-bound journal her mother had left her. She had never cried about the flight, not publicly, not privately, not in court. But now, she did, not because she was hurt, because she had healed. A week later, she booked a flight. She chose a small regional airline, quiet, unassuming, the kind where no one recognized her face. When she arrived at the gate, a young black woman scanned her ticket and smiled. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Dawson." Janelle blinked. "Do I know you?" The woman smiled wider. "No, but I know who you are. And I just wanted to say, I'm here because of you. This uniform, this gate, this job." Janelle felt something in her chest shift. Not pride, not ego, legacy. On board. She sat in seat 2A, window seat, the same placement as before. The flight was calm. No one asked her to move. No one looked at her twice. The world had not become perfect, but it had become possible. As the plane took off, she closed her eyes. She thought of her mother, her grandmother, her own younger self in thrift store church dresses and wide dreams. She thought of every woman who had been told, politely or forcefully, to step aside, to make room, to wait. She thought of how many had waited too long. She whispered quietly to herself, "Not anymore." Outside the window, clouds opened, and the sky did not just stretch, it listened, and finally, it changed. As the plane touched down and the dust of headlines began to settle, what lingered wasn't rage. It was reverence. Janelle Dawson didn't shout. She didn't sue for millions. She didn't make noise for attention. She stood her ground in silence. Then she quietly moved the ground under an entire industry. This wasn't just a story about a denied seat. It was a story about a denied identity, a system that made assumptions, and a woman who refused to become the stereotype they expected. Her restraint was radical. Her presence was political. Her silence became a signal that echoed far beyond first class, because every time someone tells a black woman to step aside, another woman like Janelle steps forward softly, unshakably, and with more power than the world ever expects. Let this story remind us that respect is not reserved for the uniform someone wears, that power doesn't always need to raise its voice, and that discrimination, even when dressed in politeness, will always be unjust to every woman who's ever been questioned, doubted, or told. You don't belong here. This story belongs to you too. If this story touched you, please like, share, and subscribe. Your voice matters, and stay tuned, because the next flight we board might just change someone else's sky. Until next time.